Hey, welcome to our first CP Bite Size webinar. I'm Sarah and I work in the VAT team here at Parry. My sole aim today is to really hopefully put your mind at ease, make sure that actually MTD isn't as scary as it's possibly made out to be, and make sure kind of by the end that you've got you're going to the right people, asking the right questions, and so you know what steps you need to take next. Introduce to my colleague Steve.
Hi everyone, I'm Steve Brooks. I'm a director in the IT solutions team, and I'll really be kind of going through today what you need to think about and what you can think about from a systems perspective. So the two of us together are going to talk through what MTD is, and in particular I'll be looking at things from a IT and systems point of view.
So we're going to broadly work through the agenda that you will have seen when we first sent out the invite, and you can actually download that now. If you just go into the handout section and download. Just to give you a brief overview, we're going to talk about what is Making Tax Digital, why they brought it in, do I actually need to comply, if I don't, do I get in trouble, what software do I need to use, and what about those other things like manual adjustments and exemptions for charities, things like that. So before we start, I thought it would be really useful if we can do a quick poll just to understand kind of how comfortable everybody is, and then see hopefully by the end if we can have improved that level of comfort around MTD.
Excellent.
So hopefully now you've got a question that's come up on the screen. If you can just kind of give us an idea, gauge. We've got another Steve in the background who's going to give us kind of an idea, an indication of where people are sitting and how comfortable people are. Hopefully the replies are coming in.
They are coming in. We've got 83% of people voted so far, 84%, 89. We're going flying.
We're nearly there.
Okay, there's a couple of people who are not paying attention or not paying attention. Yeah. So what we're going to do is, cool. So we're back. So we had only 6% of people said that they were ready for Making Tax Digital. 44% are saying hell no, and 50% are just not sure.
Okay.
So hopefully by the end, once me and Steve have been through everything, we can kind of bring up those percentages. I'd like to think that's kind of my aim for today. And just to go through, as we are talking, it'd be really good if you can if you've got any questions, just submit them as we go along, and we'll stop at points and see if there's any questions or we see common questions coming in. We'll answer those, and then we'll wrap up with another Q&A session at the end. And so, but if there's anything that we don't answer today, then please just go onto the website, put in the content that you want to speak to me and Steve, and we can pick up those questions and make sure if there is anything that's not answered, we can kind of put your mind at rest on that. So if we kick off about what is Making Tax Digital and why was it announced, well, if we just go back a little bit just to kind of set the scene, March 2015, HMRC announced that they wanted to be the most digitally advanced administrators in the world, which is somewhat amazing from where they are now, because they've got this £9 billion tax gap, and they felt that actually a lot of the errors were because of people mistyping, not recording data correctly, and £3 billion was actually just solely relating to VAT. And so what they wanted to do was they wanted to introduce a system whereby you're recording your income and your expenditure in more of a real-time information. So what I've actually asked HMRC why they want to do it, and they said because there's a lot of companies out there still which believe that have bags of receipts or they have manual adjustments on spreadsheets here and there, and so when they actually come to inspect, it doesn't really it's really hard for them to tie it together, and it doesn't calculate properly, and so they're just kind of concerned about those errors. So they think if we get to more digitally, like recording more digitally, then it will mean that those errors don't occur as often. Originally it was going to bring across all the taxes, so including corporation tax and income tax, and then unfortunately we had Brexit, and so they decided actually let's just put the stops on everything. But for VAT, because it's a quarterly reporting requirement, and we do quarterly VAT returns anyway, or most people do, they kind of felt, well actually it shouldn't be that much more of an impact for businesses. Whether or not you agree with that, we'll kind of go through in a bit what you actually need to do. But for their point, they did sort of think actually it won't make much change, it will just be the way in which you send information to HMRC. So probably the biggest question I kind of get is, will I need to comply? And the answer is, unless you are voluntary VAT registered or in one of the very, very few exemptions, i.e. you can't file for religious reasons or disability or age, then yes, you'll need to comply. And what you might have heard about is a soft landing period of 12 months. So I think some businesses are sort of thinking, well, if I've got this 12-month period, actually, do I really need to do anything for 12 months, or do I just need to worry from a penalty perspective in another year? Talking about that soft landing period, which is a 12-month period, if you're not seen to be doing anything at all, then reality is, well, they haven't sort of released what the penalties will be, is there is likely to be a penalty for just basic non-compliance. I think when HMRC talk about a soft landing period, they sort of mean, you know, I've tried to submit it and the website crashed, so I've screenshot it and then I've sent it in the normal way. I don't think it's there to sort of say, do you know what, actually just have another 12 months.
Yeah. We're not going live 2020, it's happening this year, and we've had the same thing when we've been looking at system implementations and queries from clients and whether I need to do any of this in the new system and by when. And yeah, I'd absolutely agree with that. We can't just be seen to be doing nothing or say, actually, I made no effort and my system's non-compliant, but really, what are they going to do about it? I don't think we should be taking that approach, and we'll go through what approach you do need to take, but don't rely on the soft landing, I think is what we're saying, isn't it?
Yeah, definitely. In terms of, I know we've been asked about penalties as well, sort of what it's likely to be. They haven't published it. All I will say is that when the consultation paper went to the Institute of Chartered Accountants, they did feedback that they thought they were extremely harsh, and so maybe to give you an indication, with VAT penalties, they tend to be sort of linked to lost revenue quite often. So, you know, it could be a penalty based on your box 5 number, which could be quite a big amount actually for basic non-compliance when you could have put a solution in place. So kind of the next question we get is, what is HMRC actually looking for? And there was a lot of talk around, obviously you need to store your records digitally, so for every transaction you need to now be recording a date, net VAT and gross, and then a tax code. And then I think it was assumed initially that this information would go to HMRC. That's not the case. They're still going to ask for 9 numbers, which you may possibly think, what's the point? But the way in which you send those 9 numbers will be different. In terms of what happens with that supplementary data, you can send it to HMRC and they are willing to accept it. And one thing I would say is, if you have got a system in place currently, I would actually, and it is fully MTD compliant, I would actually speak to the software provider and ask them what exactly it is that they are sending to HMRC, because I don't know if, for example, you will need to untick something to stop everything going. So it's probably worth just a question like that to say, what is it that you're sending? Some want to send their data. Most of us think that the least the better, let them ask the questions. And so probably you do still want to go with the 9 boxes. It's been asked to HMRC if they think that they'll want the additional supplementary data. And at the minute they're saying, not at the minute, possibly at some point, and I would assume it will get to that point. But I think it's really there so that when they do have an inquiry or they want to do a remote inspection, it's kind of in a format, and everybody should look broadly the same. You know, the transactions reported in a similar manner, and it should mean possibly less inspectors, if anything, and more remote inquiries, which I think will be better.
Yeah, it's welcome.
Yes, definitely, as much as we enjoy seeing the revenue. So, as we say, what exactly is changing? Well, as we say, it's the way in which you submit. You won't log on, type in your 9 boxes anymore. Instead, what you'll do is you'll send this data digitally, and you've kind of got 2 ways of doing that. And I will go through now in my basic computer language what that means, and then Steve will actually tell you in proper computer language what it means. So you'll have either a system that you'll use through, which we call API enabled, I think is right, isn't it? And that will send the data and talk to the revenues system, and it will receive that data with your 9 numbers in. Or you can go down a different route where you use some sort of bridging software where it bridges the gap between your system or your records that aren't in a format that HMRC can readily accept, and put it into a language that it can accept. Sound about right?
Yeah, I mean, they're kind of doing the same thing to a degree. Either you've got a system like you explained that is API enabled, so it means that your records are stored digitally like we talked about, but also that you can log into the government gateway and actually kind of pull down what your liability is, but then also push through your actual return, the 9 boxes. the bridging software, it uses the same language to talk, but in some of the demonstrations that we've seen, effectively the 9 boxes sit in what looks, for all intents and purposes, often like a spreadsheet, and you link those fields that do talk to the revenue back to your source data, which might just be a spreadsheet. So effectively you have a spreadsheet that says, this is my box 1 number, then my bridging software says, my box 1 here points to this data from my kind of source system that's non-compliant, but then ultimately pushes through using the same language, the same API. I don't actually know if HMRC can tell whether you've submitted via bridging software or a financial system, perhaps, especially if you don't send that supplementary data. But I guess that's the point, that they get the data in the right way, but they recognise that for various different reasons, either complicated VAT arrangements, complicated group structures, systems that perhaps belong to parent companies where you either can't or won't or can't afford or can't justify upgrading just for MTD. There's a whole raft of reasons why bridging software might be needed, but we'll talk through about kind of what we do, what we recommend, what we offer to our clients. But broadly speaking, yeah, they're your 2 options, and that's kind of how it works.
So the next question we tend to get is, can I use my current software? And the honest answer to that is you need to speak to provider. HMRC have got an approved list of providers and they need to be on that list. So it might be that they think they're compliant and they're going to be, but if they're not on the list and they've not tested their data going backwards and forwards by the 1st of April, then that's not going to be accepted by HMRC. So that's the first place I'd start, is speaking to your current software provider. If you don't have a system, or your current system, say, just maybe isn't right for it's too old, then potentially what you can do is, if you're thinking of biting the bullet and sort of putting a new system in place, then that's definitely something you guys could offer. And I know now we've got just a short video, it's a little bit like a training video, but it will essentially explain everything that you.
Yeah, that's right. I guess perhaps by way of introduction, I just talk through kind of what we do, what we offer, what we're going to show you on this video. So we're a Microsoft Gold partner, and we implement and have done for about the last 13 years Microsoft's sort of small to medium business accounting software. It used to be called Dynamics Nav. Some of you on the call may even have Dynamics Nav from us as well. That's actually been rebranded recently by Microsoft to be called Dynamics 365 Business Central. But as long as you're on a version, so Microsoft supported versions of 2015, 2016, 17, 18, and Business Central. If you're on one of those, we will have already been in touch with you about how to patch that version of the software and make it MTD compliant. So to Sarah's point, just because you have software that can be compliant, you're going to need to make sure you talk to a provider so that any updates that the provider's released have been put onto your system. If you're on a cloud-based piece of software like Dynamics 365 Business Central, Microsoft has pushed out the update already. And what we're going to show you in this video is something that we prepared for our clients to explain, okay, my system is ready, fine. How do I actually calculate what I need to submit, log in, effectively associate my system with HMRC's system? So we're going to show you this short video now that will explain how to do that in Business Central. And it should give you a flavour, even if you're not on Business Central, of kind of what it might look like in your own accountancy system.
Welcome to this Microsoft Business Central training video on making tax digital. Business Central now has the functionality to allow you to submit your VAT returns in compliance with the new Making Tax Digital legislation. This video will take you through the setup required and how to submit your VAT returns. The first thing you need to have done is registered for a HMRC Gateway account. This will provide you with a username and password, which you'll need later for setup. So let's start the setup in Business Central. If you go to Service Connections, and click on HMRC VAT Setup. What we need to do now is grant authorization for Business Central to interact with HMRC. So to do that, if you go to Process and request authorization code. This then will open up the HMRC website, and from here you can click on continue and log into your account. You'll be given a authorization code, which back in Business Central needs to be copied into the authorization code field at the bottom of the page. Once that's done, you'll get a pop-up window which will prompt you to check the VAT number on your company information page. Make sure you do that and amend the VAT number accordingly. Once that's done, if you come and close out of here, so the final bit of setup we need to do is we can now retrieve your VAT obligations from HMRC. The system can store the obligations so it can prompt you when a return is due and also automatically populate the dates of the VAT return when you submit it. So to do this final bit of setup, go to VAT return periods. Go to process and get VAT return periods. The system will then ask you for the dates that you want to return the obligations. So on this example, I'm doing the full year of 2019. So now we've got our VAT return periods. So for this example, this organisation submits quarterly VAT returns and there's 4 that are due within 2019. So now we're ready to complete our first VAT return. Before submitting the VAT return, you should make sure you reconcile your VAT submission against your general ledger. This can be done in the normal way of using the VAT statement within Business Central. If you're not sure on this process, then get in touch and we can send you over some help documents. Once you're happy and you've reconciled the VAT for the period, you're ready to submit your VAT return. Make sure the line is highlighted for the period that you want to create a return for. Go to Process and Create VAT Return. It will now prompt you to say, it's created a VAT return, do you want to open it? And for this I'll say yes. Okay, so we've now got a VAT return for the period that we've specified, so for January to March 2019. There's no information in the return at the moment, so what we need to do is bring through the data for this period. So if we go to Process, Suggest Lines. So now we need to fill in the options for the VAT return. So for Include VAT Entries, always select Open Entries only. You don't want to select any closed entries. Include VAT entries before and within the period. So that will bring through any entries that have been processed in previous periods but not yet included in a VAT return. Next step is to select the VAT statement that you want to use. Now normally your Business Central system will only have one VAT statement, but if you've created your own VAT statement, then you'll need to select it at this point. So if you select Return, and then the VAT statement. Dates you don't need to populate because they're automatically populated from the VAT return periods. Click on OK. And now you'll see on the return the lines are populated. So for each box on the VAT return, you can see the amounts have been populated. You'll need to check the amounts here and make sure you're happy with them and that they reconcile to your previous VAT statement and your general ledger reconciliation. Once you're happy with the VAT return, you go to Process and Release. Now the VAT return has been released now, and you now can't do anything with the VAT return unless you open it. Okay, so now we can submit the VAT return. So if you go to Process and Submit. So now the VAT return has been submitted, there's a few things that you can do now. So one of them is to post the Calculate and Post VAT Settlement routine. So this routine runs through and closes off all the VAT entries for the period. It will also move the balance of the VAT, either payable or receivable, into your VAT settlement account. So this is standard functionality that's always been in Business Central. If this is something you haven't run before and you need some help with, then please get in touch and we can talk you through that. One thing you can also do in Business Central now is review your VAT liabilities and VAT payments. So the VAT liabilities are the amounts that you owe to the HMRC, and VAT payments are the details of the actual payments that have been made. So within the application, if you search for VAT liabilities, and from here, if you process and get liabilities, what this will do, it will show you all the liabilities that were due to HMRC. It will show you what the original amount is and what's outstanding. And then the other one you can look at is VAT payments. So from here you can look at all the payments that have been sent to HMRC and when they've been received and the amount of the payment. And again, to retrieve them from HMRC, go to process and get payments. And this will update all of the payments that you've made. And that's it. So that's the new functionality that's in Business Central for making tax digital.
Right, we're back. Thanks for watching that, everybody. We realised, thanks to Steve, another Steve, just to complicate things, who was on the chat there, you can still see us. So good to know. Good feedback for next time we do a bite-sized webinar. Anyway, hopefully you weren't too busy watching us to take in that video. Thanks for watching it. I guess what we were trying to show there is that the process for actually going through, pulling through your obligations from HMRC, registering with the system, pushing through your liability in Business Central, and effectively submitting through the MTD system really isn't that complicated. I mean, that's everything that you need to do in a 7-minute video. So this doesn't need to be that complicated, taxing, if you will. And our system can be compliant. Hopefully you've got a system that's compliant as well, or you've got bridging software as an option. But if not, do talk to us. This is for periods that start on or after 1st of April 2019. So just because we're coming up to 2019 doesn't mean that it's too late to put a new system in, especially if it's something that you're already considering. But I guess like we talked about before, do nothing's not really an option.
So kind of the last sort of area I want to cover off now is the common questions that I kind of see, and hopefully if you've got any other questions then please drop them in at this point. I think one of the biggest questions I get is making adjustments outside of the VAT return, so making an adjustment for partial exemption or fuel scale charge, car leases, mileage, things like that. And I think there was some confusion at one point that actually you suddenly need your system to be able to do all that. And so take something like partial exemption where it's something that's a moving percentage each quarter. How actually do you do that? HMRC have confirmed that they still know you're going to have to do that in Excel, do all your workings. All they're asking you to do is, once you've calculated how much adjustment you need to make, that you make that adjustment in the system and then you run the VAT return and then you submit it to HMRC. So kind of at the point it goes, that's in there and it's already, so everything agrees and there's no sort of let's scramble together and try and work out how we ever got back to that number. And so, as I say, you definitely don't need to be doing it in the system. And if you're thinking actually a system's not going to work for those reasons, actually a system would still work perfectly fine. You just need to journal in those adjustments. Another common question we get is there any exemptions available because of a charity? I know the Charity Commission fought hard on this to try and get charities exempt from making tax digital because you have more complicated income streams, your grants, your non-business income. Again, unfortunately, they are still expecting you to file under making tax digital if you're not below the VAT registration threshold for income. And so you still need to be thinking of these changes, and when you're doing your business on business restriction in the same way, you'll do that outside of the system and then you'll kind of journal it into the system. So hopefully there's not too many changes. Probably there where you have slightly quirkier income, the one thing you need to be thinking about is your tax codes now. And so it's not just a case of something has VAT on it or it doesn't have VAT on it. You need to be putting into the system why. You tend to do that through tax codes. Do I need to do a new digital account? The answer is no. You may have noticed when you submitted your last VAT return, actually, there's a little box that comes up now that says, would you like to convert this to a Making Tax Digital account? And I imagine most people ignore that, scroll down and kind of press the submit button in the normal way because you're all very much happier to see 9 boxes as I am. At some point, by the 1st of April, really, you've got to switch that. Once you've done your last return that doesn't fall in it, just press that button and it will switch your account to what we call a digital account. Your login details will still stay the same, and then for most systems, for example, you know, your Sage, Xero, those kind of systems, when you go in, you'll see you can enter your login details, and I'm sure Business Central's the same.
It's exactly the same. Yeah.
You put those login details in, and all it is you just submit it that way. It still links to your account. Nothing else will change. You can see your VAT account, what you paid, what you owe. It just physically won't take you to those 9 boxes. All I'd say is if you press that button early, so if you pressed it today and you've still got another VAT return to get in that's not full under MTD, you'll have sort of like flashing lights around it that will say, no, you've got to file by MTD now. So if you're not quite ready for it, don't hit that button just yet. And to reiterate which period it is that it starts on, it's the first period starting on or after the 1st of April 19. So for most, the earliest will be, excluding monthly returns, will be your April to June return that's due 7th of August. So as Steve says, you've got quite a bit of time actually to get something in play and kind of get a system in place or work with the bridging software companies. So you're all signed up and ready. The 1st of April still is, I guess, not a red herring, but it's a little bit of a red herring. Just one other thing to note, there are some deferment categories as well. So if you make payments on accounts or you're in a VAT group, very few certain charity organisations, basically anything HMRC deemed complicated, which seems to be everything that just hasn't got VAT on. So there are certain deferment categories in place, and that is if you have a look at the handout section, in our total ultimate guide, there's actually a list if you fall in those categories. You kind of might have already had a letter anyway from HMRC, but it does mean it's your first return on or after the 1st of October 19. Just reverting back to the soft landing period as well, if you are on a deferment, at one point you're only going to get a 6-month soft landing period. HMRC have extended that now, so you equally get your 12 months like everybody else does. So again, as long as you seem to be doing something, then you should be outside of the penalty regime. So we've got a couple of questions, which another Steve's going to shout up now.
Yeah, so we've got one of the questions is, what is the oldest version of NAV that can be made MTD compliant?
So the oldest version, the only versions that will have Making Tax Digital are the ones that are still in support by Microsoft. The oldest one of those is NAV 2015. So like I said, Dynamics NAV 2015, NAV 2016, 2017, 2018, and both Business Central on-premise and Business Central Cloud are capable of being made compliant. Only Business Central Cloud will have already had the update pushed out to you. So if you're on that, you just need to set it up. You don't need to do any actual install. All of those other ones, 2015 being the oldest, have the potential to be compliant. You just need to talk to your provider, us if we are your provider, and we would have been in touch with you already, but your NAV partner, if you're not with us, to say, okay, I know that the system can be compliant, what do I need to do to get that update that Microsoft have released onto my system? So, like we talked about before, we'll send out contact details. Our contact details are on the website as well, so if you do have a question specifically about NAV, yeah, feel free to just get in touch with us, and we can go into that in more detail.
Okay, we have another one here. It says we use Sage for our holding company, and they have said, sorry, Steve, and already submit VAT returns automatically through Sage directly to HMRC every quarter. Do I still need to do something on the HMRC portal, i.e. the authentication code in the video, or are we already ready?
Yeah, that's a good point actually. So I'm not a Sage expert, but there are pieces of software already out there that let you link your system to HMRC and effectively populate your 9 boxes now. But it's my understanding that that isn't the same as being Making Tax Digital compliant. So what I'd suggest is get in touch with your Sage partner, get in touch with and check on HMRC what version of Sage is compatible with Making Tax Digital. Because just sending your information through to HMRC electronically now isn't the same as submitting through the Making Tax Digital regime.
Yeah, no, I'd still say, in terms of if you physically log on, just normally as you would going on to the internet, I think you still need to sign up for that box that says appearance, says, would you like to make this an MTD compliant login, and so I think we still need to do that point, and then just check with Sage, because I think that button would still appear on an older version of Sage, but like I say, it wouldn't actually work properly in the same way that MTD needs you to submit.
Okay, cool. Yeah, we've got another question, which is great. Given the deferral for VAT groups will be, given the deferral for VAT groups, will the NAV system updates required to cover VAT group submissions follow later in the year?
Yeah, that's a good question, actually. We spoke to Microsoft about this, and they said at the moment there aren't plans to cover VAT groups. HMRC's website says that VAT groups, in fact, all of the deferred categories represent, they think, about 3.5% of customers. So Microsoft's response was, yeah, we're thinking about it. I wouldn't kind of hang your hat on it being there just yet, because Microsoft haven't committed to doing it. It does represent a small percentage of customers, so they're saying, yes, if there's enough demand for it, we'll do it, but it's not on their roadmap for now. So in that case, if you are on NAV but you're in a VAT group, then your best bet right now is bridging software. But we'll keep pushing out updates about that. We've explained to Microsoft we don't think that that's a great answer. 3.5% is still 3.5% of all businesses, so it kind of reflects and represents quite a lot of people. But I guess they're just going to take that kind of cost-benefit view on how kind of complicated and how many of those deferred categories that they support, and at the moment they've said no to VAT groups. I think that's all the questions we've got for now. Like we said, if you've got any more, anything that you think, I really wish I'd asked that, or I don't know, you're just thinking about making Tax Digital this evening, maybe.
Like I do every day.
Yeah, like all of us do. Then yeah, just fire those over, get in touch with us, get in touch with your normal relationship person, Parry, and we'll be happy to help. Sorry.
So what? Oh, that's right. Yeah, so we one of the things to do. So we've had some great questions on here, and I know that if anybody has any further questions and you think about them later, just go to our website. And then obviously submit your questions to us here, and we'll always get back to you. We'll not leave you hanging.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thanks very much for listening.
Thank you very much.
And we got one. Yes.
One more poll.
Yeah, here we go. So hopefully now you've listened to us talk about MTD in detail. We're kind of going to ask how comfortable you are now, at least in knowing what steps you need to take. What you need to do as soon as you clicked end webinar is that you frantically send 6 emails, but hopefully you kind of know who you need to send the emails to now and what you need to ask them. So there's a poll on your screen.
So we're collecting the responses now. 65% of people voting. I wonder if we'll
hopefully
beat the last one. Yeah, hopefully it's not gone down, no.
Fewer people, but the ones that are left, they know what to do. Yeah.
That's it. So we'll give them about a few seconds, and then we'll collate the data. Okay, so actually it's been brilliant. We've got 5% of people who still say they don't know, but no one says no, they don't know what to do next. And 95% of people said so, obviously, that they do know what the next step is they're going to take.
Great. Brilliant. Thanks for that. So the 5% of you that still don't know, get in touch, and yeah, we'll be happy to help. Right. Thanks very much for watching.